Welcome back, Nooblets. Today I want to share a very personal story about my origin at YD Development and how it led me and Yuri to closing on our first deal together, which was an $8 million walk-up in Hell's Kitchen. Even though this was YD's first project, it still took us a long time to get here, so if you're looking to get into real estate, be aware that it's a long-term commitment. Also, everyone's path is different, so while what I'm about to tell you isn't a step-by-step instruction manual, I've distilled my path down to 8 lessons that are applicable to anyone. Now buckle up, because this is a long video. Actually, according to YouTube Analytics, I'll lose almost all of you by the 3rd minute, so I've added some timestamps in the description for each lesson if you want to skip around. Lesson 1. Circumstance matters. The unfair truth is that the real estate game is not played on a level playing field. There's a lot of nepotism at the top, because it can take generations to build wealth in real estate. But the level of difficulty you initially encounter is a function of circumstance, things that are out of your control. Like whether you were born into the right family, and had the upbringing that led you to go to a top school and meet the right connections to land you your first job. Or maybe your family has real estate and capital to begin with, and you've been unofficially working in the industry since you were a kid. But once you get your foot in the door, how much you can achieve really becomes more of a function of working smart and working hard. That being said, a lot of my circumstances made things easier. I was raised by middle-class parents in a wealthier suburb in Long Island. I went to an Ivy League school and studied engineering, so I sort of knew how to handle the numbers. Prior to jumping into real estate, I ran a tennis retail business, so I was mingling with all the right people in country clubs all the time. In fact, that's how I got a job in real estate. But then, some circumstances made things harder for me. Like, do you know how many Asian Ivy League engineers that play tennis and a classical instrument are out there? It's like we were mass-produced in a factory. It's hard to differentiate ourselves. Also, I'm super introverted, and I don't have the natural charisma or the physical presence that some of the best dealmakers do. Bottom line is, work with what you've got. Find where you can leverage your circumstances and improve your chances to achieve your goals. The second big lesson to learn is that succeeding in real estate takes a long time. It's the most expensive asset most people buy, and usually with a long-term horizon. I took on a real estate finance minor in college knowing I wanted to get into the industry one day. But I lived in my parents' house until I was 30, worked as a management consultant and a violin teacher on the side while running my tennis business, and I saved every penny to buy my first property 7 years out of school. A year later, I sold my business and started working for Gale International. Lesson number 3. Find a mentor. I met Stan Gale when I was running my tennis store. He was a customer and we started playing tennis together. Turned out he was also a prolific real estate developer, and he lived about a mile down the road from me. Or rather, my parents. So I eventually asked if he could take me on as an intern, and eventually that led to a full-time position working at his company in Manhattan. So I sold my store, and I quit my other 2 jobs to dedicate myself completely to real estate, and it was a hell of a ride. Stan taught me a lot of things through tough love. He forced me to be more extroverted and put myself out there to find ways for people to work with us on deals. And he instilled a mindset where we kept asking ourselves, what if, in situations where there didn't seem to be any solutions. And this was over a backdrop of 2 very different projects, an $80 million condo project in Manhattan and a $35 billion city in South Korea. Since the New York office only had a dozen people, I gained experience in a number of areas, because in a small company, you tend to wear a lot of hats. And that leads me to my 4th lesson. Learn the details. If you work at a big development firm, you may get pigeonholed into a specific role and not get a broad array of experience. A developer is like an orchestra conductor. We did a video on this. And you need to know at least how each vendor and contractor works together. While I was working at Gale, I was also managing my rental property, where I decided to be personally on site with the handyman for everything that needed to be fixed. I've replaced every part of every toilet. I've redone 2 roofs. I've changed windows. I've changed doors. I've changed floors. I redesigned kitchens. I've installed lighting, and the list goes on. And meanwhile at Gale, I helped turn a hole in the ground into a 15-story luxury condo that eventually sold out. I also worked on deal hunting, marketing, pro formas, data science, prop tech research, and I did lots and lots of networking. So I spent 5 years learning the details. Lesson number 5. Find a good partner. Networking is so important in this industry because it's really based on personal relationships. I used to have a lot of trouble with this since I'm so introverted, but I forced myself to go to networking events regularly. I would bring a stack of business cards, and I told myself that I couldn't leave until I had given all of them out. Be friendly with everyone, and keep an open mind about how you can possibly work with them. It only serves to open up opportunities for yourself later, and you'll probably make some good friends in the process too. I met Yuri through the work I did at Gale, and we periodically kept in touch with each other until we realized that our timing and our cash situations were aligning to do something together. I was also reaching out to a lot of my network at the time to figure out who to do a deal with. But Yuri stood out because we had complementary skill sets. We overlapped in some areas, but for the most part, we had very different strengths that covered each other's weaknesses. Lesson number 6. Raise money. Now this is the juicy part that you're probably the most curious about. So how do you buy a building if you don't have nearly as much cash as you need? The simple answer is with other people's money. And if you've been following our Real Estate for Noobs videos so far, I gradually build up to how institutional deals are structured with debt and equity. In the case of our Hell's Kitchen deal, Yuri knew an equity investor looking to deploy capital. They also wanted to do an all-cash deal. So we were in a very fortunate position of having the equity ready long before we needed to close. It doesn't always happen in that order though. Sometimes you have to secure a contract on a property before potential investors will commit their capital. But you have to constantly maintain relationships with institutions and high net worth individuals and know who to reach out to when you find a viable deal. Lesson 7. Property hunting is like dating. Don't fall in love too soon. We didn't do anything particularly special to find 424 West 47th Street. The listing was out there on Cushman & Wakefield's website, the OkCupid of real estate listings. So just like I used to do with OkCupid, we ran some back-of-the-envelope models, and we scheduled a date with the broker, Chris Broadhead. We recently played Guess the Closing Price with him, by the way. Check it out. It was one of dozens of tours and hundreds of back-of-the-envelopes we did around that time, because it's a numbers game, and we were sluts. But on this tour, we discovered something special. We realized it would work for co-living. This was very specific knowledge that I had developed from doing consulting work for Common when they had just formed, and I was able to apply lesson number 1 here. Co-living was so nascent back then that there were only a handful of developers who knew what to look for. The co-living model allowed us to bid a little bit higher than what we knew that condos and multifamily bidders might offer. So we submitted what we thought was a very strong offer to Chris, and then we waited. It was rejected. He said if we came up a little bit more, we would be in first place, but we knew our limit. So just like in dating, we didn't chase, because chasing makes you look like a fool. We walked away and continued touring other properties. Lesson 8. But once you close, go all in and make it work. Months later, I got an unexpected phone call from Chris saying our offer was now being seriously considered. And after doing some due diligence and letting the lawyers go back and forth, we actually got an additional $150,000 off. And that was our moment of commitment. We were still looking at hundreds of other properties while still closing on 47th Street. Because unlike in dating, in real estate you can be polygamous without pissing people off. In fact, you have to build a pipeline of deals in order to sustain a development company. But anyway, once you realize that you're going to close, you should go all in and focus on making the best product you possibly can for your future tenants or buyers. We had an extra long development period due to some bureaucratic red tape, so we used that time to design every cubic inch of the property. We tried to imagine what it's like to be a tenant in as many scenarios as we could think of, and we reverse engineered how to make those experiences more comfortable. We thought about little things, like placing light switches next to the bed, so you didn't have to get up and close the switch by the door at night. Or installing really expensive smart toilet seats, because heated seats are awesome in the winter. And designing a lighting system in the air shafts to try to replicate sunlight and brighten up the lower floors. Check our project videos to see what else we did, because it's completed and open now. So, to reiterate, focus your energy on creating the best product you can deliver for your tenants. I've said this in several other videos, but it's important for me to drill it in. Put people first, because they're your customers. It's the easiest lesson to learn. The financials, on the other hand, just keep getting more complicated. So we still have some more lessons coming up on that front. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time, Nooblets.